What is going on, you guys? It's your boy, the contemporary anti-Coomer here, and we're back with episode 82 of the video game therapy series. I'm in a bit of a spacey mood today. I feel like I always start these off talking about what mood I'm in, but it doesn't end up seeming to matter. It seems like all these videos have their own, are all on the degree of pointlessness anyway, so the mood is kind of irrelevant. But yeah, a little spacey and out of it today. So hoping this will get me back to planet Earth, in some whatever arbitrary sense that means to you. But yeah, I've started using this. I don't know, the word "cooming" a little more. Maybe just being a bit more liberal with it than I perhaps have been historically. And I think it is reflective of what I see as lots of, I don't know, contemporary life as being in pursuit, or at least just literally, I guess more directly even, or in indirect pursuit, either the direct or indirect pursuit of what I would consider mostly masturbatory-esque pleasures. Now, it doesn't literally mean jerking off all the time. But I honestly would categorize a lot of the activity and behavior in a lot of the same ways. It's, very hedonistic, and hedonistic in a, I don't know, like in a self-fulfilling sense, really, like, hedonistic for you, and not really, because I mean, you could kind of argue that, I don't know, it is kind of a form of hedonism in doing stuff for other people for the only benefit of you feeling better about things. You could even make like a argument about, I don't know, it's kind of the virtue signaling part of things. You could argue that is no more, instinctually hedonistic than just literally jerking off, more or less. But a lot of the, videos and things that people watch and interact with, and just a lot of online content in general now is I don't know, very, very masturbatory in nature, and in the sense that it promotes no betterment of one's own self, or really anything beyond just maybe not directly stroking the ego, but something that doesn't seem, I don't know, in pursuit of anything beyond a very materialistic satisfaction. Which is annoying to me, only because I think, in general, humans are capable of more than they're letting themselves do, myself included, which is why, perhaps self-loathing is such a strong emotion and driver of my, what I do all the time. But I don't know, I don't necessarily think that's, I don't know, I guess their power's forever at odds. There's not really much else I can go about trying to fix that. But it is, I do think that lots of what people do now is masked or otherwise abstracted forms of what I would consider masturbatory pleasures. But anyway, I suppose I'll move on to something else. Speaking of moral duties, or morality in some sense, I think there is some, maybe not direct, but I do think we have a moral obligation to I say our bodies, but not in a, like, make my body feel good sense, but in a sense of maintaining and developing one's body to the, it's kind of a similar vein of, like, I think people have a moral obligation to be as quote unquote educated or as wise as they could be. Like, to seek wisdom is a moral end. And I think in the same vein, we should seek development of our physical body, so like, we should have a right almost to 2 hours in the gym every day. Because we speak about, universal healthcare, we should have universal healthcare. But I imagine, or I just even had a thought experiment, how many illnesses and injuries would be prevented if, I'm not saying everybody has to be this, bodybuilder, whatever, but clearly we're not spending enough time, working on our physical bodies, in the sense that most people are hilariously out of shape compared to what they could be. I'm not saying everyone could look like a bodybuilder, but if you think that what the average person, like the physique of the average person, is what the average person could look like should they, if they're really pushing themselves or really, developing themselves to their highest possible extent, I think you're delusional, because, the average physique in my eyes looks like shit, and, because I think I have average genetics probably at best, or, maybe, sure, whatever. Even if I don't, I still think comparatively, I would say that most people could look way better, or just be in better shape. It's not even about looking better, but just developing their body much more than they do already. And I also think that would put a lot less pressure even on our societal system of healthcare in general, right? I mean, think about I don't, mean to berate fat people for their pressure they put on on medicine, but they do. If there was, people that are healthier and exercise and do all of that, I just think we have a moral obligation to being in the best shape possible. And I don't even think it's an egoist thing either. Sure, it could be vanity stricken, and I think the hardest part beyond starting a regular exercise routine is then defeating the ego, so to speak. So I guess the first hardest part is getting in the gym to begin with, and the second hardest part is to basically stop ego lifting, or stop lifting for vanity, or in the sense of you're chasing numbers or something like that. That's like the second hardest part. But people aren't even in the gym to begin with, and I don't mean, obviously there's 1,000 ways to be in good shape, but like walking, I've said this before, if walking is considered exercise for you, you either need to be like severely disabled or you're out of shape. Like if 20 minutes of walking is like, oh, it's exercise, you're out of shape, like badly out of shape. And or you're disabled, right? I guess it's one thing if you have one leg and walking is an arduous task, like that's fair. I'm not gonna, but odds are if you're making that argument, you're not the person I'm talking about. But I think, if you're just a regular person, with, I don't know, high blood sugar or something stupid that you did to yourself, walking should not be considered exercise. And if it is exercise, it's I guess evolve and graduate past that would be the ideal goal. Because it really shouldn't be. I think, I don't know, I think especially the physical bodies, much like I believe that the modern contemporary human is a lot more capable of developing themselves from an intellectual standpoint, or even just a spiritual, psychological standpoint. There's a lot that we leave untapped there. I would, make the argument doubly for their physical body. And the good thing about the physical body compared to developing, intellectualism or wisdom or whatever the fuck you want to call it, is it's a lot more concrete. It's easier, right? It's not like there's these mysteries of, it's pretty, calories in, calories out, a very, very simple, and yeah, it's not like a foolproof thing. It's not like we're certain you're going to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger if you, eat these calories and whatever, or do this exercise. No, there's a lot of genetics and kind of mystery that goes into it that we don't understand. But for the most part, it's not rocket science on how to not look like shit, or how to, and even beyond just not looking like shit, that would be the first step. But I think we could all collectively look way better than we could. And I don't mean to make the argument about looking better. I think, there's health, being healthy looks a lot different. And it's not about, the physical appearance of looking better. It's more about the obviousness of how we're not developing our physical bodies to their potential. And looking at people as one obvious way to do that. I'm not saying everyone needs to, obsess over their physical bodies. That's not the case at all. But developing one's body, the fact that I can look at somebody and obviously tell that they have serious untapped potential, I think is kind of the problem. It should be the point where of course, in my ideal society, in my perfect world or whatever, people, they have the moral duty to develop themselves. And yeah, we're still limited by our genetics and, by disabilities or whatever the fuck would happen. But you wouldn't be able to look at somebody and be like, okay, this person obviously doesn't exercise enough. But I can do that with 99% of people. I can just say, okay, this person just doesn't, has a lot more to improve on. Which I guess is, I don't know, I guess it makes it easier for me to have this kind of argument, because I don't think that it's not like it's, I'm uncertain of how much more we could develop. It's quite obvious we have we're not even close to, our ceiling, or even just what I would think would be a good average. I guess in terms of human development. I guess the other thing with, humanity as a whole, and maybe this is more of a anti-accelerationist argument, which I make very often. And maybe it's obvious to me at this point, but it will not be the failure of technology that kills us. What I mean by that is it's not like, it won't be our inability to cure cancer or something like that that is what causes the, eventual destruction of the human, of our, Western society or Eastern society, or even just humanity as a whole. I think it will ultimately be a failure of, I guess, for lack of a better word, like virtue, or development of ourselves, in a, not really in a physical, not in a physical sense really, or really in a purely intellectual sense, but in a kind of more moral sense. Because I've been thinking about it, if we don't really judge animals as good as bad, or as good or bad, they're instinctual creatures. They just kind of do whatever their instincts tell them to do, and it's not like a good or bad thing. And the dog pissing on the carpet is we think it's bad, but that, ultimately things being good or bad is only because we have, it's our ability to judge actions that gives morality. So if humans didn't exist, in some sense, morality or ethics wouldn't exist. And because ethics and morality exist because of humanity, I think it is then our duty to, in some sense, to uphold that, and then pursue things on which we view through our moral or ethical lens. And I think the loss of development of that will ultimately be our actual evolutionarily undoing, because we will have forgotten, and we're not even have forgotten. I suppose somebody will remember, but we'll lack the ability to act and develop that part of our being. Which again, it's kind of wishy-washy. I know a lot of this is kind of wishy-washy, but that's it's more about the idea behind what the hell I'm talking about than the actual words themselves. So I don't know, because the other thing with debating about, or not even debating, just talking about any of these topics is it's always tempting for me and difficult to avoid just going into a pedantic argument about what the words mean, because to everybody the words always mean different things, and because of that, you can never really have a purely I'll even say an objective conversation about these topics, because each word themselves is loaded with so much bias that it kind of ruins, that even something if I talk about consciousness, right, or divinity as an idea, that means entirely different things to some people than others. So my knee-jerk reaction is to then spend, an hour defining very meticulously this idea of consciousness. And of course, what that does is just, it brings in other words thinking. Okay, now we have to define thinking very, very, pedantically to satisfy each of our debates. And it ends up, we end up finding ourselves further away from where we started. Which, I don't know, it allows for a lot of creative expression. That's why I consider this not an intellectual exercise, but more of an artistic exercise, because, intellectually, once you dig into anything, you never really progress. You can very easily not progress on what you're talking about. And let's say, even if you are able to make progress on this conversation of, let's say divinity in the subconscious or something like that, then ultimately, you're making very shallow arguments, because you kind of have to assume that, people know what you mean by consciousness or divinity, or they have the same conceptions of it, because in some sense, some people view like a god or a higher creator in a very different sense. Some people, whenever you say God, it automatically goes to this Christian God, or a paganist thing, or there's all kinds of different conceptions of divine, and it's certainly not your conception of it is certainly not the same as mine. So when we have like any kind of intellectual debates on it, you end up just talking on different frequencies entirely about it. So it kind of makes it almost a pointless exercise, which is why I don't bother trying to talk to anybody else in these things. It's like, oh, like bring somebody else on and talk to them. And it's like, because ultimately if we end up arguing about anything, it ends up just being clouded. Like you're just talking on different fronts. Like both of you have different ideas of the words you're using. And so you're just kind of talking past each other and there's not really any development. Whereas if I'm just talking to myself, I know what I mean with it. So I'm like, yeah, I can argue with myself, but ultimately I won't, it won't be an entirely like, won't be an entirely like, I don't know, two disjointed conversations. It'll just instead be one unified, still arguably pointless conversation to have, but still a unified, like I'm reducing the variables by only having me, talk about my conceptions of these words to me and me only, right? Whereas, whoever's listening to this can, they can have their own definitions, come to their own opinions, but they don't interject my stream of consciousness. Which again, so I view it very, very much as an art form and not like any, even the word art has, I'm certain that your conception of art is vastly different from mine. So even like me calling this some kind of art may be insulting to you. I don't even know. I don't really care, honestly. But it's ultimately like my conception of it. So that's, I don't know. I'm not sure how I devolved onto this, but let me move on to something else. Oh boy, dark in here already. Okay. All right, let's see. Yeah. Yeah, I guess this is a related topic to the, I don't know, developing one's physical self to their highest abilities. And not really in a vanity-stricken sense either, but just in a kind of a moral duty sense. In the same way you'd have a duty to, like, I don't know, be as wise and as good as you are and explore goodness and wisdom to your possible extent. Exploring your, not your body sex, I just mean like, how strong and robust you can make your body and how whatever, not in a vanity sense, but or even in a functional sense. Like you don't have to be the strongest you could possibly be. It's not really about strength or stamina or speed or anything like that. It's just more of a holistic development towards, I don't know, being better. And I don't know, maybe I have too high of expectations for like ordinary people or average people, which I consider myself to be a part of. That's, I have probably too high of expectations for myself in that same regard, but I want to hold other people to higher standards because I think it's insulting to hold other people to like, the standards of what you might consider the standards of a child, right? And do you want me to consider you a child when it comes to, my, goals and aspirations for you? I would believe we have, to have higher standards than that, and including myself. I don't let myself do childlike masturbatory activities in the same way I would hope that you wouldn't. Which is why I'm just very repulsed by the ordinary, not even the impulses, because I am equally, open to those impulses, but the acceptance of ordinary as it. It's like we're very like, it seems that many embrace this averageness and ordinariness, which I think is, again, maybe it's just my philosophy, but I think we should reject being ordinary. Not in the sense that you won't end up being ordinary, because I think, statistically or however you want to measure it, you probably are anyway, and that includes for myself. But this interest in being ultimately average is like, this like pursuit of averageness, or like even to like maybe just fitting in as a broader term for this is despicable to me. I don't know why what is the point of a life living to like be accepted by other people whom you haven't even, like, do you think that highly of other people's conception of you? Like, who are these other people that you're so, hell-bent on trying to, be like? Like, do you really want to be like them? So in a very broad sense, I'm repulsed by this idea of being ordinary or being average. And I don't see why more people aren't like disgusted with this average. And in some sense, I'm not asking more people to be disgusted with themselves, because I think self-loathing is already kind of high, but I don't think the answer to it is like accepting average as it. I think there is a certain level of misery and self-loathing that is, not only functionally beneficial to act as motivation, but also kind of necessary for human life, period. I don't think, I don't think we've made it, we'll never make any progress in terms of like being ultimately happier in this. I really don't think that there is I truly believe in this hedonic treadmill or like set point, or like the adjustment of that to be like, it's not going to improve with generations. Like I think there's no amount of technology that will, I literally, instead of just hooking us up to drugs and gamifying us or putting us in vats and having us boil away or whatever, like a life that is well lived, a human life well lived, includes significant misery, pain, self-loathing, and all of that. Like I think avoiding it is stupid, and also just not good for, even from a virtuous sense. I don't think that it's important that we avoid misery at all costs. I think surely a life that is defined by misery, that's one thing. But I think we're not at the point where everyone's life is always defined by misery. And even so, if it is defined by misery, what to what ends is that being put to any like greater use? In the sense that like you might be miserable, but in the same way that, there's all kinds of great creators of anything. That's why I like producing stuff or just making stuff. Like, even if you are this supremely miserable being, I think you have some obligation to do something with it and not embrace, and not, continually lower your expectations to become just, I don't know, okay with being a piece of shit. Right. And perhaps there's some rescaling of your conception of average or ordinary. The phrase I like to use just in general is that, like, you're doing fine, but you can always do better. You're doing fine is not a way of validating, like, this is an acceptable location, but it is a, like, conceivable location. It's not like you're doing inconceivably horrible in comparison. But the second clause of, like, you could be doing better is, like, that this is not, still falls short of your potential, which you will, like, until you die. It's not like you're ever going to, be 100 and be like, oh yeah, I've totally reached all my goals. It's all there. Like, I think, having kind of this undying lower ambition is kind of a part of the human experience. But I think too many people very easily ignore, or are very good at ignoring that, kind of lower impulse to be greater, higher calling, whether it is intellectual, religious, or spiritual, or whatever. I don't really give a shit how you frame this, like, greater conception of something beyond you, and the development of you to that end. But I do think it does exist, and it's easier now than ever to ignore all of those impulses. And again, coming back to where I started, by doing, essentially cooming, which is again, the word I use for this, like, kind of vague masturbatory pleasure. And, maybe it is literally jerking off for some people, but for other people it's just, fixation with social media and materialist stuff, and, money as this, ends in itself. I don't know. I think all of it does a lot to poison the human soul. And I think there's a lot more exploration that is freely available to us, for each of us inside. And we love to ignore that. And instead just coom, because it's easy now. So, I don't know. Perhaps it's just because we're so far abstracted from our, from a version of, like, biological success and difficulty, that it's, we're still tied, because evolutionarily we're not any different really than, the people 1,000 years ago. The only real difference is we have, I guess, better, I'll say in broad strokes, education in that sense, where we're able to develop language quickly. We have, technology to help us, but like, the humans themselves can't keep up with technology. Like, even the technological developments in 20 years would take, if we just left it to evolution or human development, would take, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years to develop. Like, think about our brains physically changing in size. So we'll never be able to keep up at that level with technology. So I think there's there's a certain wariness that comes with and knowledge of that. I think some people think that we can just are infinitely adaptable, and while we are very, very adaptable as beings who have evolved to survive in these circumstances, I don't think we're infinitely adaptable in the sense that we could just do anything and become these cyborgs. So there's some looking out for our biology, where it's like we are obviously battling our biology. Like there's no way biologically we're designed to sit at a desk and play Minecraft or to type emails or something, like even like the keyboard or something. These ridiculous interfaces are not biological in any sense of the word. It's an absurd abstraction from our base biology. And I'm not saying we have to go back to just spearing fish or whatever. I think but we want to be knowledgeable and careful about where are we fighting our biological impulses. If it's a battlefield in some sense, it can be thought of that way, kind of. Where are we staging war? And in one sense, a lot of people are challenging. There's a lot of, obviously you can go on any route here, but people that are challenging like the sexual biology of humans. I don't know. It's interesting to try to consider the historical implications of like, think of all that is responsible. Like this is pain as well as victory. I'm not saying just look at the bad stuff. Look at everything responsible, like from human testicles, testosterone, like as a hormone that evolutionarily we developed or something. Think of all the not only the bloodshed but also all of the I guess all of the successes as a result of testosterone. And we can make we could do a pros and cons list, I'm sure, but ultimately, like the fact that we are today is evidence that the hormones that we had, as flawed as they might be, and being responsible for war and all these other things, envy and whatever, that all the stuff that testosterone has done, it has certainly led itself to. We're here now, so like obviously something drove us there. Same with with estrogen on the other side. Like there was always there's this biological kind of battle, and some people are waging war on that side of things. They're kind of waging war against our biology in the sense that they're challenging this historical male-female, which again, wouldn't be where I would put my first sword in terms of battling our biology. But again, it's just interesting to think of it in that sense, because we aren't any different. It's like it's like some people challenging the notion that we should have a third arm or something like that. No one's doing that challenge because it's ridiculous and we're not able to do that. But because we can, kind of fuck with our hormones and mutilate our genitals, people are experimenting with that. And I'm not saying that it's like an experiment in this weird 90s, science sense or something like that, or some dumb Bill Nye the Science Guy experiment. I just mean from a evolutionarily historical, biological sense, we're battling on those grounds, which is interesting. I don't know. There's a lot you could say about the ovaries and the testicles and their influence on history, both good and bad. All the bloodshed of war, as well as all the the ambition that comes with developing agriculture, technology, cities, society. This can all be attributed to the same hormones that we're fucking with here. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see where. I guess I won't be around to see, or I'll be dead. To see where a lot of this ends up going. But anyway, I also, and this is just, maybe this comes back in what I've seen. I just got finished reading a book about history. So if I'm feeling very historical right now, it's just because I finished that book. It's called The Lessons of History by Will and Ariel Durant. Very good. Very good book. On my bookshelf, even, perhaps. But what was I talking about? Oh yeah, the boom and bust cycles of things. I think lots of cultures, society, arts, technologies, even in any broad sense, a lot of them follow this like boom and bust cycle, where they go through kind of like this sine wave or sinusoidal-esque wave of development, where there's like enlightenment and there's dark ages, that kind of thing. And I think some people are under the impression, and perhaps I was for a good number of years, that Like we're past that, come on, the dark ages, like we'll ever go back to, the Stone Age or whatever. And perhaps there's good arguments for believing that our technology will last. We've buried it under the ground, or this, Antarctica's got a bunch of seeds and GPUs locked away in the snow or something like that. So even, if an Armageddon, we'll still be able to salvage, some of our technology. But I think especially if it comes to like governmental structures, I think these are all very in a very wide, like year, decade, century lens. They are pretty fragile. Like it made it was looking at the different types of governments, and democracy as an idea is not, is relatively rare, I guess, in the course of human history. And there have been periods where things were democratic, then they were monarchical, and then it was like the aristocrats ran everything, and then it was back to revolt, and it was very, very, it's a cyclical pattern, right, where you'd have power would consolidate due to inequalities of man, wealth inequality, or whatever wealth was at that time. Maybe it was bales of hay or gold, or now money, or now it's fake money and some stupid credit card account or something like that. It ends up consolidating, and there's once the power gets too out of hand, then there's a revolt, and there's this whole like kind of cyclical idea of history. And we've seen that, at least looking back, we've seen that. But looking forward, I think it's a little naive to assume that we'll never, like, America, will never, like, could never die, right? Like if you think in a couple hundred years, you don't think if there's any chance of like a widespread revolt. And I'm not advocating for any kind of revolution. I just think in some sense, I kind of believe that it's inevitable. Like there is inevitably another bust at some point, just because history kind of tells me so. And I'm not saying that we haven't like redefined history, because by definition, we kind of have to, but especially with how unstable things, appear at a very surface level and even below the surface, I don't think it's stupid to assume that there will eventually be an end to, maybe it's all consolidated into one thing instead of having, different countries, Western, Eastern, and China and Russia. Well, in a couple hundred years, it'll all be consolidated into the New World Order, which will be, maybe it'll be a monarchy, maybe it'll be democratic, maybe it will, who knows really? I'm not trying to predict the future here, beyond the fact that I do think that there will be, there will be kind of, we'll never not see another revolution again. We'll see another revolution. We'll probably see, governments being, we've even seen this in our lifetime. Governments have been overthrown, in South American countries and whatnot. I don't know the specifics of it, because I don't really care or live there, and I don't follow the news that well. But it's not stupid to think that within like a few centuries or a few generations, there isn't a complete upheaval of what is known now, the Congress and the Senate and whatnot. I mean, even just like the January 6th riots is kind of laughable as that is from like a genuine revolution type thing. It does show that there is, despite the powers of the technocracy and the surveillance state, there is, there's still some power or some ability for people to, like, the people themselves, like within a high enough number to revolt. And they haven't throughout history. Rome has collapsed. There was all kinds of things that, like, nothing has lasted forever. So it's stupid to think that we'll last forever. Now, it's one thing to be sounding the alarms like, oh, next year we're going to have this huge revolution. I'm not saying that at all. I don't even think, perhaps not even in my lifetime. I think conservatively, there's at least another decade or two of rot before there is any kind of revolution. But, it could be, feasibly a few centuries before there's like a genuine like upheaval of the entire kind of Western archetype. So, and it has followed this weird pattern of like, I believe it's like democracy, then goes to monarchy, then aristocracy, and then, oligarchy, then back to democracy. There's like this pattern, this like cycle. And I don't know that we'll see, I'm not predicting that it'll be a monarchy next, or there's like, a dictatorship or some sense. And I'm not saying there's not either. I'm just saying there's, we see that's the pattern that's been. It's been, a loss of, there's some degradation of, virtue on some level. There's some degradation of intellectualism or of education. And then that kind of leads to this, collective revolt. Because as much as we want to talk about things being unequal and wealth inequality and stuff, humans themselves are limited by their being one of them, right? It's not like as a physical human, I guess at a very level, I could beat the shit out of Elon Musk, like that kind of like physical person to person. Now, granted, you could have an army of robots or something, or whatever. But ultimately, like any one person or group of people is physically limited in their size and their scope. Now they have like the abilities beyond that, but if you'd like to believe that if there's a war of like, let's say like, I don't know, the top 20% of monies is like, I don't know, a couple thousand people, couple 100,000 people, maybe like 10,000 people or something like that hold, I don't know, let's say like 50% of the world's wealth or something like that. I don't know what the number is. If you're saying that the 8 billion people organized under some, revolutionary wouldn't be able to seize the wealth from those 10,000 people is foolish. I mean, even like on a physical level, I don't care how many bombs and drones you'd have, they'd have to wipe out the majority of humanity to protect their measly, whatever farm they're on or something like that, or whatever real estate they own. And, at enough point when it becomes unequal enough, there will be like that kind of revolution. And it's not it's not hard to see that we're kind of going towards more inequality. I think inequality will increase. And perhaps there's governmental reaction. I think another possible reaction of inequality is that it becomes, we kind of enter a communist stage or a socialist stage. But ultimately, I do think while man is kind of created equal and is equal in essence, I don't think that man, I'm just using man as like a placeholder here. I'm not talking about men as a gender or a sex or whatever. Man develops themselves unequally, where there are people who are more likely to, I guess, seize power, control, seize wisdom, seize whatever. Like there's generally consolidation of things into fewer and fewer hands as time goes on. Like we've seen that in any kind of historically we've seen that. We've never been able to like clone people and make all people that are all the same. Like while people are the same in a very like general moral context, people are not the same in their abilities as we have structured society. But even I'm saying, even if we structure it in like a communist sense where everyone is given, it's all equal, I don't think eventually it doesn't work, right? And just like, I think eventually democracy doesn't work because then it always fades into some oligarchy or technocracy or, whatever it is now. The communism and socialism fall to the same arms. The same ends happen, right? It's not like there's this ultimate form of government that always works. It's cyclical. In the same way, I don't really believe that democracy works in an absolute sense, or like not an absolute sense. It works. It can't work forever, right? Just by naturally think they fade and it breaks and it has to be rebuilt. I believe the same thing about communism or socialism. So like while it might work on some time horizon for some percentage of the people, no governmental structure will always work forever. Like there will always be a collapse of the government structure, which I think is fine. I think part of what gives things value is their transience and the fact they're not around forever. So I'm not saying that we should celebrate, America's short reign over everything or how great it is. I just think it's foolish to think it'll always be this way, and there's not some end in sight. That's not also to be cynical about it either. I'm not saying that it's sad that America or whatever won't be the powerhouse, or democracy won't always be the form of governance. I just think there's kind of natural developments that happen as a result of our very limited human biology, and especially as we've globalized stuff. It's kind of hard to redo our evolution to get us more ready to be able to do this stuff, because I think biologically we're not ready to do a lot of the kind of revolutionary egalitarian initiatives that we want to do anyway. Like communism as a government structure would work if we were all more of the same. Like, you know what I mean? Like instead of us being like the thousands of difference of dog breeds or whatever, if we were all like one type of dog with like very one type of everything, like if we all looked the same, we were all 6 foot, 150 pounds, whatever it was, I don't even fucking know. If we were all identical, I think, in every, even in a genetic sense, communism would probably work, but we're not. So people that are, naturally unequal by any measure, at least in individual measures, maybe in the aggregate, we're kind of the same, I suppose. But generally people are unequal. So then that is naturally going to, kind of develop into unequal governance structures. So communism can't really work with unequal people. I'm not advocating for people either being the same or not. I just think that's just how it works. And unless we can't really undo evolution and try again. So we're kind of stuck with this, a cycle of governance structures and not just one final government structure. I'm not an anti-democratic person either. I just think it's not like its grasp on the world is not is transient. It will end at some point, and we'll go back. Not go back in some sense, but we'll enter a different form of oligarchical or monarchy or some kind, or some weird other development of governance. And I don't know. I'm not saying it'll be in our lifetime either. I just think it's kind of historically inevitable given our predisposition of humanity. So anyway, I'll move on to something else because I've beaten that one to death. I guess this is kind of related. Globalization. I think especially as things become very, very connected, like geography used to play a huge role in everything, like rivers and whatever, and kind of, and not saying geographic stuff doesn't still play a role. It does. It just plays much less of a role than it has historically. Where it's like having access to the water and boats and stuff doesn't or hills, or having the high ground doesn't mean shit. In fact, living on the 10th floor of this high ground is worse than living on just the first floor, second floor, making it easier. So geographical, even in a very abstract sense, geographical advantages don't really exist that much anymore. And globalization as the concept of things being more and more interconnected. I'm thinking about it in the lens of like culture, because different geographies would develop these different cultures. So like if you lived on the high ground, and there was this big river down below, and you guys made some religion up about how important the river was or something like that, you had this very distinct, like, oh, you see like these river people that like they love this river they have and whatever. But especially as things become more of the same for everyone across all of the world, I think globalization will kill culture. Whereas some people are on this idea that, if we like connect people, we'll have like this, more mixture of cultures. Where I think I'm sensing that it will become more of a monotony. Like we'll have, if everyone owns and lives through an iPhone and lives in accordance with, money as their object, we're going to see a lot less, culture in some very, very broad sense. And that'll reflect itself, artistically in what people create. But also in many other ways, like all the advantages of different cultures, foods and whatnot. Like even for businesses, I think as globalization happens, it kind of meets more of this like free capitalist fair market plus whatever, I guess, governmental incentives or taxes are influencing. But it ultimately like leads to this like the best businesses of margin, right? Whereas like not necessarily the best businesses themselves or best or most culture things themselves. It's all about like margin. And so I don't know, especially even something like religion or higher belief. Like let's say that, even now like religion's kind of dying and no one gives a shit about even of any of them anymore. But like, if we all subscribe very, very heavily to this, strictly atheist rational thinking, why would we believe that we're going to have like more robust culture? Like we'll have like less and less culture. Everyone's going to be the fucking same because we all have, are kind of worshiping the same fucking God. So, I'm not saying that, it was better if when there was, the kind of world religion was some, dude with a white beard up there, I don't know, giving out fish or whatever, loaves of bread. I'm just saying there was a lot more diversity in like higher religions because of geography, and we didn't even know. But now that everything's so connected, I think there's going to be a consolidation of all of it to where there's very little variance on that. So I think part of my, I don't know, strategy and trying to, not really, because I think there's a lot of value in, like, I guess, diversity of everything, including diversity of culture, diversity of art. I think there's value in kind of escaping in, as much of that globalized interconnection as possible. Not to, I'm not going to go outside and live in a tree and make a religion about, a puddle of water or something like that. But I can certainly try to remove the amount of globalized influence I have in an effort to try and be more unique in my my approach to life, because I think that will be at a higher premium, and there's also some higher moral duty to I don't know, to fight consolidation in that sense. At least I think even a species needs people that don't that don't do that. Sure, most people can assimilate and reject many of their deeper, lower impulses in exchange for conformity or security or whatever, or the illusion of such. But I think there's certainly a subset that needs to fight that, and I guess that's kind of what I try to do with my daily affairs. But I suppose I'm only as effective as I guess history will let me know whether or not I've been effective or ineffective in my my efforts. But anyway, yeah. But the boom and bust cycle is a very interesting concept in the sense that, I don't know, I don't know if it was just a school thing or what, but it was always it's almost intrinsic to assume that there was, like, boom and bust was just like a historical footnote. Like, this, like, we always kind of go up and up. But I think it was mostly, maybe it's just a cultural philosophy on its impact on education, in the sense that it made me think, even as a kid growing up, that there was always this, like, up and to the right kind of arrow. Whereas history does not say we're always up and to the right. Like, sure, maybe from like a food production standpoint, we're up and to the right, kind of, but in a, like, in many ways of defining progress in any kind, human civilization progress and whatnot, is boom and bust, especially cultural progress. I suppose if I don't mean cultural as just like, racial diversity. I just mean culture as in, I don't know, a variance of everything, like biodiversity culture. Maybe not biodiversity, but cultural diversity. I don't know. It's very difficult, because that's also where I would love to go into these pedantic arguments about what culture is. People have very, very different conceptions of what culture is, and my conception of culture is certainly much different than, I don't know, some Marxist or something, or somebody that only thinks culture is just racial. Culture is not racial. It's like, in that sense, it's like, I don't know, you're kind of racist if you think that things being cultural is just multiple races. Like, in a lot of ways, that is racist. That's kind of a racist view to have, is to think that's like, oh, it's cultured if it has, maybe different skin tones. That's kind of a very, very shallow version of, like, diversity to you is just skin tones. In many ways that is kind of a racist thought, or at least a racist conception of what is culture. You're like, you don't think two people that look the same can have different cultures? That's pretty fucking racist. So I don't know. So it's certainly, my conception of culture is probably much different than yours or anyone else's, or especially the conception in a broader societal sense. I'm sure that most people have a different idea of culture, and even the legal definition of culture or diversity is probably much, much different than what I think it to be. But anyway, I guess I can't really control other people's definitions of it, and it's but it would be where I would see there's worthy discussion of a pedantic, like, what the hell does this mean? Can we better define this argument? So I don't know. I think we're if I were to draw a graph, I think, of the boom and bust cycle that we're on now, I think we peaked at some point culturally in the past, and we are now heading towards another bust. Now, it could be a couple hundred years, and I'm not speaking technologically. Technologically, I don't know. It's a different graph. But I think if the rise and fall of civilizations, not even civilization, the rise and fall of, America, the West, the East, I think you'd be like, even like from a religious standpoint, it wouldn't be stupid for me to say that religion is on the down descent, right? It's not like, not everything is up and to the right, but I think along with that, with the loss of, I'm not saying the loss of religion is responsible for everything, but similar to the trajectory of religion, I view the loss of culture and the development of individuality and all the important things that make up kind of the upticks they're fleeting, right? Where more people are interested in conformity. There's not this, not saying that a hyper individualist, mindset is what drives people forward, but eventually it results back in that in the beginning. Once everything, once Rome is blown up, it's back to individuals piecing things together and, developing, kind of starting at a new conception of a government, a new conception of human life and morality, because, morals are very relative, both in a historical sense and an individual sense. And I think we don't do much on the exploration of deciding and figuring out for ourselves what we find as moral or immoral or virtuous or viceful, and however you want to define it. And I don't know, it'll lead to a consolidation of virtue and vice, of good and bad, and ultimately to another bust at some point. But I do think it probably won't be in our lifetime. Maybe it will be, maybe within the next 50 or 60 years. And who knows how long my life is anyway. Maybe this is the last year for me, but I don't know, I won't be that pessimistic. But I'll wrap it up there for today. So ended on a nice suicidal note, but no, that's it for me. But anyway, thanks for watching. Peace out. I'll see you next time.